All right, ranking Death's discography. In my opinion, not just the greatest metal band of all time, but one of the greatest American bands of all time with a truly flawless discography. Putting any of their albums in last place feels inherently wrong, and I can genuinely say that I love every single Death album, and you can make a defense for any of these being number one on your list. You could reverse my ranking and it would be very much defensible. That's how perfect Death's discography is. All right, here's the list. Number 7 for me is Spiritual Healing, their third album released in 1990. At this point, Death is very much established as one of the premier bands in death metal. This was recorded with Scott Burns at More Sound Recordings and can really be looked at as one of the first major shifts the band makes in terms of their songwriting and especially the lyrical content. Chuck moves away from the blood and gore of the early albums into more social commentary. There's also a huge shift in songwriting and production. The production on this album is a lot different. In some ways, it's cleaner, more direct, but the vocals are mixed in a pretty unique way. It definitely stands out. When you listen to this and you listen to any other Death album, you can hear a really noticeable shift in the way the vocals sound. The lyrics and the songwriting, I think, are major steps forward. I think there's a legitimate argument that this is the band's best album in terms of lyrics. It asks some huge existential questions. It's definitely a feat in that regard, and the songwriting is far more progressive than the first two albums. But to me, the production does hold things back. And although when I listen to this album, it usually sticks out like a sore thumb how different the production is. By the time I finish it, I'm usually thinking to myself, maybe I like this more than I think I do. And then I listen to a different album and kind of realize, yeah, this is definitely my least favorite. I still think it's a great record, but to me, this is number 7. Number 6, Leprosy, their second album recorded in 1988. This could be looked at as the first true blue death metal album ever. On Scream Bloody Gore, Death is still kind of perfecting the sound. They're definitely still rooted in thrash and hardcore and kind of the sounds of the 80s. On Leprosy, they really are finalizing and perfecting the true death metal formula. The songwriting is definitely more progressive than Scream Bloody Gore, but this still has a lot of the grit and that kind of barbaric sound that Scream Bloody Gore has. It's still heavy, it's still massive. Pull the Plug and Choke on It are all-time classics in Death's canon, some of their best songs ever, and this just in general might be Death's most bleak album. The Scott Burns production here allows the band to just sound naturally raw, and even at this point before Chuck is going like full-on virtuoso on guitar, they still sound much different than any other band in death metal. I particularly love how mangled the vocals are at this early stage of Death's career. Still love this album just a little bit less than the others. Number 6. Number 5 is Individual Thought Patterns, released in 1993. This follows up the groundbreaking 91 album Human. This is a super tight 40-minute masterpiece that's even more technical than Human with a little bit less bite. Part of the brilliance of this album to me is how tight and catchy every song on here is for how progressive and technical this album is. Again, recorded by Scott Burns at More Sound Recordings, and he made a concerted effort not to lose the bass in the mix. This also features one of the most impressive drumming performances from Gene Hogan, who previously played in Dark Angel. This would be most bands' greatest achievement. For Death, it's really just another day at the office, but I definitely wouldn't argue if somebody had this at number 1. At this point, I feel like every album is a legit masterpiece. For me, it's number 5, but an absolute gem of an album. Number 4 is Scream Bloody Gore, 1986, the brutal beginnings of death metal as a genre. Although this definitely pales in comparison to Individual Thought Patterns when it comes to songwriting and progression, it trumps pretty much everything in Death's discography when it comes to sheer savagery. Every fan is going to have their own preferences, but just in general for me, I'm always super drawn to a band at their early stages when the energy is greater than the technical ability. And that's definitely the case on this album, where Death are as barbaric as any band in the genre. This is before Death had truly established death metal on Leprosy and sees the band still very much rooted in thrash, pulling from the evil of early black metal, the power of hardcore, and obsessed with the gory imagery and lyrics. And along with being their heaviest, this is probably their catchiest affair as well, particularly on songs like Denial of Life and Baptized in Blood. Number 3 for me is Symbolic, 1995. This is arguably the band's best produced album, produced by Jim Morris of More Sound Recordings. Definitely a much cleaner production style than Scott Burns, who kind of had a classic swampier sound. It lends itself to the more melodic songwriting, but they don't lose any of that grit of the earlier albums. And the way these songs seem to evolve and grow in real time is truly a mind-bending experience. Chugging riffs morph into noodly guitar solos, back into melodic leads, all the while Gene Hogan is going absolute beast mode on the drums. He's again the drummer on this album, and it's another phenomenal performance from him. This is widely regarded as one of the greatest death metal albums of all time, and for many, it's Death's best. To me, it's number three, but I'm not arguing with anybody putting this at number one. Number two for me is The Sound of Perseverance, 1998, the most polarizing album in Death's discography. Some people believe this is essentially a Control Denied album, as Chuck had broken up Death, was working on Control Denied material, but was contractually obligated to record another Death album before being able to actually release music by Control Denied. So that's definitely part of the reason why this album stands out. It's kind of the black sheep. Without a doubt, this is the most Guitar Hero-ish of any album in Death's discography, and really sees Chuck go in God mode throughout with a virtuoso, noodly guitar style. Really, in general, the entire musicianship on this album is insane. It's arguably the most progressive, which certainly says a lot. It also sees Chuck employ a much higher pitched vocal style on here that probably has more in common with black metal than anything in traditional death metal at the time. I love this album for how unique it is and how much it stands out relative to anything else in their discography. So to me, it makes it really special, but I do understand some people find this a bit more divisive. Some people have this at the back end of their ranking. To me, this is number two, an absolute masterpiece by Death. Number one for me is Human, released in 1991. This is personally my favorite death metal album of all time. Death are never one-dimensional on any album, but it does feel like on a lot of their other albums, they're sort of honed in on one particular aspect. The early albums are particularly gritty and heavy as a newer band developing this death metal style. Then they get into something much more progressive. Some albums are far more technical. Human, to me, kind of puts everything together. It has that unrelenting heaviness of their early albums. It has the progression and technicality of their later albums. It still has great lyrical themes, but it also is insanely catchy for doing all those things at once. It has that classic Scott Burns production sound, but it still sounds unique to anything else in the genre, as there's a certain songwriting style that you only get from Chuck Schuldiner. You have songs on here like Together as One, which are full-on crushers, but also have some of the best guitar solos in the band's discography, while you have songs like Cosmic Sea, which are progressive metal masterpieces. I just think this is the best the band's ever sounded, the best the formula's ever come together, and a true perfect album. All right, that's the ranking. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your Death ranking looks like. What's your favorite album by them? What's your least favorite album by them? And understand that I don't disagree with anybody. I'm not going to argue with anyone over what their discography ranking looks like, because to me, the testament of an elite band like Death is everybody has a different ranking of their discography. I know people that have Spiritual Healing at number one, and I'm not arguing with that at all. I totally understand it. It's a masterpiece of an album. Every album that Death has ever recorded is. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what band I should do next, and stay tuned. Subscribe for more lists like these.